Party is a big deal. Rebelling together.
This is a paid political announcement.
We're always starting at 6:30. I don't like that. This is Point FM's nightly news for Thursday, the 22nd day of February 2018. The Boundaries Commission report gets approval from the House of Representatives, signaling the announcement of an election date is that much closer. Former Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer bows out of active politics after almost 3 decades as a politician. Caribbean diplomats ask the UK to be compassionate in the treatment of Caribbean migrants, and growing anger among the parents of a group of missing Nigerian schoolgirls following an attack by Boko Haram on Monday evening. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday evening. Welcome to those of you joining us via radio, to those of you via Facebook Live, via our app, and those of you joining via pointefmradio.com. I am Phil George. Parliament was not prorogued when today's session in the House of Representatives ended. Instead, the lower house of Parliament was adjourned sine die, meaning another session of the House can be convened at any time. However, that is unlikely, as the Prime Minister again hinted that general elections will be in a matter of weeks. According to law, before an election date can be announced, the Boundaries Commission report must be laid in Parliament. It should be done not less than 2 or more than 5 years after the date when the last such report was submitted. The Commission is responsible for reviewing the number of constituencies into which Antigua and Barbuda is divided and the boundaries thereof, and shall submit a report to the Speaker stating whether changes, if any, are necessary. The Constitution outlines in part that if any draft overlaid before the House is approved by resolution of the House, the Prime Minister shall submit it to the Governor-General, who shall make an order in terms of the draft, and that order shall come into force upon the next dissolution of Parliament after it is made. That report, filed on December was approved today with no changes, as the committee, with the exception of Lindley Winter, agreed that if early elections were to be called, then no changes should be made to constituency boundaries. The Commission agreed that changes would prove disruptive to the conduct of an early election. Prime Minister Gaston Brown, laying the report before the House, questioned the exclusion of Commissioner Winter, who presented a separate report to the Speaker. Mr. Brown said he saw no reason why his pronouncements should have given rise to doubt.
Mr. Speaker, the minority report was premised on information that the member considered to be unreliable. But I don't know why the information would be considered unreliable, in the sense that I have been on public record since June of last year indicating that there will be early polls. And I don't know why members on the other side did not take me seriously. And you know that I say what I mean and I mean what I say. So I find it a little strange that we have been literally given time for preparation, and that there are members who continue to second guess us, even members in the wider society. I hear a number of individuals on the radio proclaiming to understand my behavior, and based on my behavior, they're pretty sure the elections will not be called before November, December of this year. Well, I want to say to those individuals that they need to disabuse their minds of any such notion, because the reality is the elections will be in a matter of weeks. And this sitting, unless there are any extenuating circumstances, shall be the last sitting of the lower house until the next general elections.
Prime Minister Gaston Brown in Parliament today. General elections are constitutionally due in 2019. Well, the political leader of the Democratic National Alliance, DNA, has expressed disappointment in the lack of effort being made to promote voter parity throughout the country. All Saints East and St. Luke Member of Parliament, the Honourable Joanne Messiah, says yet another parliamentary term is coming to a close and there has been no movement to ensure voter parity where constituencies are concerned.
I recall, Mr. Speaker, many years ago, while I was a student in the United States, hearing a lot of discussion and talk about the commitment of various administrations to achieve what appears to be this elusive voter parity. Because the fact of the matter is, we have constituencies in this country ranging in sizes from just a little over 1,000 stretching to a little over 5,000. And it can't be right in any burgeoning democracy, one where we are seeking to develop and to create a more perfect union, if you will, for this to continue.
The DNA leader stated that the time has come for the Constituencies and Boundaries Commission to be given the respect it deserves.
Because I believe that the persons who are appointed to the commission do take their work seriously. And I want to say, just as I seek to close off, that where the Constitution and or other law that calls for the creation of important bodies such as this, the whole element that is underscored and in fact spoken about in respect of independence must be seen and felt by not only the members of the commission or the body, but by the broader society. And this would call for example, a dedicated line in the budget to ensure that the work of the commission, in this case, can be fully carried out and realized.
Well, in response, Prime Minister the Honourable Gaston Brown has given a commitment to addressing the issue of voter parity when his government is returned to office and with the new commission appointed in the first year of their new administration. The Prime Minister said the government allowed the commission time to complete its work, considering their task was a huge undertaking.
The commission, which operates independent of the government, had since June of 2015 to get its job done. The issue was not a resource problem. I mean, when you're making sweeping changes in which all of the boundaries within the country would have been changed, it would have taken a significant amount of time because clearly they had to consult and they had to actually survey and do different things. So it is time consuming. And I'm pretty sure that if we were not having early polls, that the Boundaries Commission would have completed the work on time. So this is not necessarily a lack of commitment. In fact, it is not a lack of commitment on our part. The fact that we established the Boundaries Commission so soon, within 12 months, would have signaled our intent to address the issue of parity within the various constituencies.
In other national developments, this Thursday evening, former Prime Minister and leader of the opposition United Progressive Party in the House of Representatives, the Honourable Baldwin Spencer, has bowed out of active politics after close to 3 decades as a politician. Mr. Spencer called it a day during what is believed to be the final parliamentary session before snap elections are called. With many glued to radios and televisions and scores of others listening via the internet, a humble Baldwin Spencer rose in the parliamentary chamber, expressing appreciation for the opportunity afforded to him and the experience gained in serving Antiguans and Barbudans.
It was and has been a tremendous experience, and I wish to say that I have to give thanks also to the Almighty God for guidance and obvious support to see me through.
Mr. Spencer, known for his work in the Union representing ordinary Antiguans and Barbudans, credited the late father of the nation, Sir V.C. Byrd, for steering him on the political path he took, which after years of being in opposition, he finally rose in 2004 to become the head of government. He had secured a place in the history books as a 2-term Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. While he admits he may not have had it right all of the time, Mr. Spencer is satisfied that the country under his tenure made significant progress.
And I cannot say to you, Mr. Speaker, that I was able to get everything right. clearly none of us is infallible. And looking back, I could say to myself that if I had to do certain things over again, I would have done them differently, based on experience and so on. But on balance, I would want to believe, Mr. Speaker, that significant strides were made during my 10 years Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. I know the other side may want to argue otherwise, but the record is there, the information is there, impacted.
Former Prime Minister Spencer has spent his almost 30 years in the lower house of Parliament, representing the people in the constituency of St. John's Rural West. As he departed today, the Honourable Baldwin Spencer pledged to continue playing a role in advancing the country.
Completely humbled by the experience here. I want to believe that I've tried at least to make a significant contribution to the development of Antigua and Barbuda. I did it with no personal ambitions other than being able to serve. And I just wish to say to the people of Antigua and Barbuda and my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle that so long as the Almighty God gives me breath, I will continue to show an interest in the development of Antigua and Barbuda. I will continue to do everything I can to assist, whether it's in St. John's Rural West or wherever in Antigua and Barbuda. I will be there for the people of this country.
That's former Prime Minister and leader of the opposition United Progressive Party in the House of Representatives, the Honourable Baldwin Spencer. Well, commendation was in abundance today for the Honourable Baldwin Spencer as he retired from active politics. Government MPs took time out to heap praise on the former Prime Minister for his tenure as a politician and leader of government. For his part, Prime Minister the Honourable Gaston Brown told the House provisions will be made to ensure Mr. Spencer enjoys the benefits of a retired head of government.
We will have to probably come back to Parliament at some point to have a special act befitting of a retired Prime Minister to make sure that he enjoys certain services, certain privileges. I've already given instructions to the Honourable Attorney General, the member of St. John's City South, to make sure that those arrangements are put in place. We know that you're not a man of vanity, but as a former Prime Minister, it is important that you now transition into the position of a statesman. And whereas we know that you'll always be politically tied and that you will have your partisan preferences, we expect going forward that as a senior statesman, yourself and Celeste, that both of you will help us to deal with some of the issues affecting our country as we mature into a better democracy.
The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has informed the government that Antigua and Barbuda continues to be the leading economy within the OECS, with growth predicted at 5% for 2018. Governor Timothy Antoine and other officials from the St. Kitts-based bank are on island reporting on the ECCB's performance and prospects for growth in the economies of the currency union. Cabinet spokesman, Information Minister Melford Nicholas welcomes the bank's outlook for the state, but he says government is more optimistic about the country's growth rate than what is predicted by the ECCB. He says that is premised on the expected boost in economic activity through investments. The government's fiscal performance was also discussed.
We are slightly above the OECS norm in terms of what we pay from every dollar that we collect in taxes and duties. For emoluments, I believe that we're about 2% above the rest of the OECS. When it comes to the payment of pensions, I think, again, we're about 3% above the rest of the OECS. But clearly, in terms of the way we have been managing our debt to GDP, we are on the right path. It is expected that by 2030, all of the ECCU territories would be at the desired optimum of 60% of debt towards GDP. I believe St. Kitts Nevis, within the context of the ECCU, is holding the pole position at this moment. Antigua is not very far behind. Our percentage is about 75% at this moment, and we do intend to keep managing that figure downwards until we get to the optimal figure of 60%.
An issue that was discussed during the meeting with the ECCB is ease of doing business in Antigua and Barbuda. Minister Nicholas says it is an area that requires improvement, and they have begun the work to change the country's ranking in that regard.
And we are third within the OECS. We have had a major movement recently, and we looked at the profile, and based on the interaction, and especially based on information that I shared with the bank, is that we would expect to impact several of our individual scores later this year based on certain ICT projects that we are implementing to improve the way we do business, both at the business registry and with respect to tax collections. So we have a very positive outlook, and I believe that the bank has scored us accordingly.
That's Cabinet spokesperson, Information Minister Melford Nicholas. The Israeli man who was remanded to prison in connection with a wounding incident last month has secured bail. A High Court judge granted the 29-year-old $1 million in bail yesterday, with a cash component of 400,000 EC dollars with one surety. Among his bail conditions, he must report daily to the police station. Ilya Romanov is accused of using a sharp object to wound 28-year-old Ross Bloomfield of Dutchman's Bay in his neck during an alleged altercation in the dockyard area last month. Bloomfield was rushed to the hospital where he underwent surgery and continues to recover. Police have charged Romanov with wounding with intent to murder. That's a look at the national developments this Thursday evening. Stay tuned, more news to come.
Something big is coming. This Saturday night, we present the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party launch, 7:30 p.m. Come out and meet the candidates at Rising Sun Grounds with performances by the Queen of Bacchanal, Destra Garcia, The Boss, Iowa George, the new Queen of Dancehall, Spice, Idonia, Menace, Tion, Drastic, and Claudette. Rising Sun Grounds this Saturday night. The Antigua Barbuda Labour Party is a big deal. Rebuilding together.
This is a paid political announcement.
Thank you so much for staying with us this Thursday evening. The Boundaries Commission report gets approval from the House of Representatives, signaling the announcement of an election date is that much closer. And former Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer bows out of active politics after almost 3 decades as a politician. We continue this evening, this time with news from across the region. Caribbean diplomats have asked the United Kingdom government to be more compassionate in the treatment of Caribbean migrants. The diplomats on Wednesday urged the British Home Office to adopt the approach towards retirement age Commonwealth citizens facing deportation, despite living in the United Kingdom all their adult lives. The British Guardian reports that there could be thousands of people born in Commonwealth countries who emigrated to the UK with their parents as children and did not realize they were required to formally naturalize in Britain. Their unresolved residency status could mean they face problems accessing pensions, housing, healthcare and work, according to Guy Hewitt, the Barbados High Commissioner in London. New evidence of harsh treatment by the Home Office emerged this week when officials say they now accepted that Anthony Bryan, age 60, who has spent 5 weeks in immigration detention centers in England, was in fact lawfully present in the United Kingdom. Bryan, a grandfather who has lived in the United Kingdom for 52 years, has had 2 spells in detention and was booked last November on a flight to Jamaica a country he left in 1965 when he was 8 years old and has not visited since. The report said the decorator lost his job in 2015 because he was unable to prove he was not an illegal worker and struggled to convince the Home Office of his right to be in the UK until his case was highlighted in news reports last year. Brian said he was relieved but angry at his treatment, which has left him heavily in debt because he was prevented from working for almost 3 years. Hewitt and fellow high commissioners have raised a broader issue with the Foreign Office, urging officials to take a more humane approach in cases like Brian's and Paulette Wilson's, a grandmother who lived and worked in the UK for 51 years, having arrived at age 10, before being told she was an illegal immigrant, being detained and threatened with forced removal to Jamaica, The Guardian said. It said Caribbean diplomats were concerned that people were reluctant to try to regularize their status because of fears they might be detained or deported. Hewitt described the difficulties experienced by many as a tragedy. As the Jamaica government looks for ways to sustain the momentum from the state of public emergency in St. James, which recently received parliamentary approval for a 60-day extension, there is a growing online petition calling for similar measures across 3 other parishes. According to the petition on change.org, the country needs limited states of emergency in Clarendon, St. Andrew, St. Catherine, which the petitioners argue will have a beneficial ripple effect in the adjoining parishes of St. Anne, Manchester, and Kingston. The petition cited murder figures for 2017, insisting that based on those figures, they need at least 5 more states of emergency. According to the lobby portal promoted as a platform for change up to yesterday evening, the petition had received 903 signatures. On January 18, after St. James closed out 2017 with 335 recorded murders, 67 more than the previous year, Prime Minister Andrew Holness declared an immediate state of public emergency for the parish, stating that crime and violence, in particular murders, have been escalating in the parish, and he had been advised by the security forces in writing that the level of criminal activity is of such a nature and so extensive in scale as to endanger public safety. The move garnered widespread support across various sectors, particularly the business community, but also earned Jamaica negative international attention, with Canada issuing travel warnings for the resort town of Montego Bay. Prior to that, the United States had also issued a travel advisory for the island. On January 30th, the Prime Minister asked Parliament for and got its approval for the 60-day extension, which will take the state of public emergency for St. James into the month of May. Police crime statistics up to the end of December reflected 1,612 murders, although the projection was for 1,526 by the end of the year. This was 263 more than the similar period in 2016 and equated to 19.5% increase in the murder rate. The U.S. territories of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands will need to take painful actions to restore their economies amid the hurricane devastation, New York Federal Reserve President William Dudley said today. The island territories, especially Puerto Rico, already faced dire economic realities even before hurricanes slammed into them late last summer. But the recovery now is complicated by shrinking populations, high debt, high unemployment, and plunging growth, Dudley said. Dudley said in prepared remarks, Puerto Rico must not only complete the recovery from the hurricane, but also do what is necessary to get on a sustainable economic and fiscal path. While he provided few specifics on the steps needed, he said they likely would be unpopular. Hurricane Irma struck the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico in early September, and 2 weeks later the islands were hit again by Hurricane Maria. New York Fed data showed the storms destroyed more than 80% of Puerto Rico's crops amid communications outages and fuel shortages, while transportation links were cut. The White House has faced stinging criticism for its support for recovery and reconstruction in the storm's aftermath, which left more than 1,000 people dead in Puerto Rico alone. In news now internationally, there is growing anger among the parents of a group of missing Nigerian schoolgirls following an attack by Boko Haram on Monday evening. Parents of pupils who disappeared from their boarding school in Dapchi told the BBC their girls were still missing. Here's more in this report.
In the days that followed the 2014 raid on Chibok Secondary School, the Nigerian government was silent. The army said the students had all been rescued, then changed its mind, and for weeks officials downplayed the scale of the tragedy, until the Bring Back Our Girls campaign went global. This week there have been some chilling echoes of those confusing days, with a rescue claim followed by a U-turn, an apology, and still no clarity as to how many girls are missing. Some say 50, others suggest around 100, and whether they've definitely been kidnapped by Boko Haram. The relatives of the missing Dapchi schoolgirls have already been through a lot. They'll be desperate for some good news, and fast. Parents of more than 100 girls from Chibok are still waiting for their daughters, almost 4 years after they were seized by the jihadists.
Saudi Arabia says it will invest $64 billion in developing its entertainment industry over the next decade. The head of the General Entertainment Authority said 5,000 events were planned this year alone, including those by Maroon 5 and Cirque du Soleil. Construction of the country's first opera house has also begun in Riyadh. The investment is part of a social and economic reform program known as Vision 2030, unveiled 2 years ago by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The 32-year-old wants to diversify the economy and reduce the kingdom's reliance on oil, including by increasing household spending on culture and entertainment. In December, the government lifted a ban on commercial cinemas. General Entertainment Authority Chief Ahmed bin Akil Al-Khatib said in the past, investors would go outside the kingdom to produce their work and then showcase it back in Saudi Arabia. A large entertainment city near Riyadh, roughly the size of Las Vegas, is already planned as the country aims to boost its tourism sector. It follows a range of other firsts for the conservative Gulf Kingdom, including allowing women spectators to attend football matches last month and announcing that women would be permitted to drive from June. Last year, Prince Mohammed declared his ambition that Saudi Arabia would once again be a country of moderate Islam that is open to all religions, traditions, and people. Finally, on the international news this evening, Alabama is set to execute a cancer-stricken inmate despite his plea to spare him potentially unnecessary pain. Doyle Lee Ham, 61, argues his veins are too damaged from cancer and past drug use, and the lethal injection would be unconstitutionally painful. He was convicted of fatally shooting motel clerk Patrick Cunningham in 1987 in a robbery where $410 was taken. Ham is one of 3 U.S. death row inmates due to be executed today. The other 2 are in Texas and Florida. If all the executions occur as planned, it would be the first time 3 prisoners have been killed on the same day since 2010, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. Capital punishment in the United States was reinstated in 1976. In the case of Ham, Alabama argues he has been in remission from cancer since 2016, according to Alabama Public Radio. A judge denied the inmate's appeal and said the state would not use any veins in his arms and hands in the execution. That's a wrap-up of regional and international developments at 1 minute on 7 o'clock. The weather report is next.
Here is the weather forecast and marine conditions across Antigua and Barbuda for tonight, Thursday, into tomorrow, Friday, 23rd day of February, 2018. A fresh to strong northeast wind flow generated by a strong surface high pressure coupled with northerly swells will maintain hazardous seas across the region into weekend. Across Antigua and Barbuda for tonight, expect partly cloudy and breezy conditions. Few light passing showers could also develop. For tomorrow, partly cloudy conditions are expected with a slight chance of few passing showers. The winds generally out of the east-northeast, ranging between 14 to 20 knots or 26 to 37 kilometers per hour, and reaching up to 22 to 24 knots or 41 to 44 kilometers per hour over coastal waters and gusting higher in showers. The sea conditions will be very rough, with swells reaching 2.4 to 3.7 meters or 8 to 12 feet. A warning remains in place for small craft operators and sea bathers. Total rainfall for the month of February at the airport is 24.9 millimeters or 0.98 inch. High temperature recorded today was 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Tonight's minimum temperature can be expected is 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunrise time for tomorrow Friday, 6:29 a.m. and sunset time for tomorrow, 6:12 p.m. Cecil Matthew from the Met Office reporting.
The weather report has brought us to the end of Point FM's nightly news for Thursday, the 22nd day of February 2018. Now for a recap of the headlines that made the news. The Boundaries Commission report gets approval from the House of Representatives, signaling the announcement of an election date is that much closer. Former Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer bows out of active politics after almost 3 decades as a politician. Caribbean diplomats asks the UK to be compassionate in the treatment of Caribbean migrants, and growing anger among the parents of a group of missing Nigerian schoolgirls following an attack by Boko Haram on Monday evening. That's our newscast this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of all of us here at Point FM Radio, I am Phil George, wishing you a pleasant rest of the evening. Goodbye.
This is 99.1 Point FM.